The FIA GT Championship has moved on to Suzuka in Japan. Let's join Simon Taylor.
Welcome to a baking hot Suzuka, and here's the reigning champion Bernd Schneider, who once again has pole position in the V8 Mercedes. It's looking good for the Silver Arrows, although the blue Person V12 Mercedes of Gunnar and Thiemann, unhappy on the Suzuka bumps, had this off during qualifying. Our Scots hero Alan McNish in the Works Porsche has qualified third, but it's an all-Mercedes front row again. The Brazilian Ricardo Zonta taking the number 2 Mercedes into its position on the outside of the front row. It's 1,000 kilometres long, this race, and the heat is going to be a big factor. There's the second Works Porsche, Jörg Muller on the outside of row 2, Alan McNish on the inside. Then come the old-type V12 Mercedes in their blue Person colours, and 7th quickest, our old friend the Silver Penalties, with a new trio of drivers this weekend, led by Frank Lagorce. Back on row 5 is Jeff Lees in the black GTC McLaren, shared as always with its German owner Thomas Bashir. And now they go away on the warm-up lap. The track temperature, as you see from that caption, 41 degrees centigrade. And it's going to be a very long and a very hot afternoon. Fastest GT2 car in practice was the gallant red Marcos. There it is on the left of the picture there, the red-nosed, green-painted car. And cockpit temperatures in that Marcos, front-engined, very hot inside. We're riding in it now, in fact. Cockpit temperatures during practice were recorded at 60 degrees centigrade inside that cockpit. Korreuser, the Dutchman at the wheel now, weaving about to warm up the tyres. Immediately behind him on the grid, the 2 V10 Chrysler Vipers, his strongest challengers in GT2. The 2 Silver Arrows at the front, coming down to the very tight chicane, which leads them onto the start-finish straight of this Japanese Grand Prix circuit at Suzuka. It's a rolling start, of course, as it always is in these FIA GT battles. And as they come onto the start-finish straight, the lights are still red. Now they're green, and the Mercedes move as one. Yellow mirrors is Schneider, red mirrors is Zonta, and it's Schneider who's nosing ahead as they go down the start-finish straight, down towards turn 1. Alan McNish is there as well in the first of the 2 Works Porsches, then the 2 blue Person Mercedes, but it's Silver Mercedes 1 and 2. It's Works Porsches 3 and 4, then the 2 blue Mercedes, and then Jeff Lees has made a tremendous start up from the 5th row. The Marcos is leading the 2 Vipers in GT2, but at the front, the Mercedes already putting their authority on this race, with Schneider and Zonta leading McNish and Muller in the 2 Porsches. Wonderful swooping circuit here at Suzuka. It's got every sort of corner. It's got quick ones, it's got tight ones, plenty of overtaking opportunities. There is Jeff Lees in the black McLaren, consolidating this remarkable start he's made, which has put him ahead of the Silver Penalties and ahead of the 2 green Zaxby Porsches. There's the Marcos, 1, 2 and 3 in the GT2s, the Marcos, and then the 2 V10 Chryslers, but the 2 Mercedes at the front. And what's going to be fascinating to see is whether Bernd Schneider will try and extend the lead, while Ricardo Zonta in 2nd place tries to ease his pace and keep those 2 threatening Porsches behind. All this season, the Mercedes have been the winners in the FIA GT Championship. Porsches, always the bridesmaids, never the brides. But today, Alan McNish thinks that he can get among the Mercedes. Schneider, number 1. Zonta number 2, their race numbers indicating the places they are, and Zonta is still tucked in beside Schneider, and the 2 Porsches are staying with them as they go up to 195 miles an hour. We ride now with Jeff Lees in the McLaren on the brakes at the end of the long straight, nosing into the slightly downhill turn 1 with ahead of Thomas Bashir, the 2 V12 Person Mercedes on the power once more as we watch these Mercedes. You look at the colour of the mirrors in FIA GT racing, because that's how the pit crews are able to tell their other identically coloured cars apart. And into the pits, one of the Japanese entries, that's the Toyota Supra of Keiichi Tsuchiya, who's already in trouble. In fact, he's been off. Look at the gravel in the air intake. He's been into one of the gravel runoff areas, and Alan McNish, meanwhile, keeping the pace up. He's not letting those two leading Mercedes move away from him. He's got his teammate Jörg Müller running behind him to support him, and still yellow mirrors and red mirrors. Schneider leading Zonta, then McNish in third place, Müller in fourth place, and these four cars are bringing the Mercedes-Porsche battle to the front of this race in Japan. Schneider now easing away a little bit from Zonta. Zonta is now perhaps starting to hang back. Is it because he wants to, or is it because he can't quite stay with the pace of Schneider? Here's our GT2 battle, and look at Koreuser in that multicoloured Marcos weaving down to the right-hand side of the road to block off Carl Wendlinger. He's going to share that car today with Justin Bell, and still holding the GT2 lead as the GT1 cars are already lapping the slower GT2 cars. Eric Graham's little black Porsche being lapped already, and once more Zonta in this traffic is closing up again. Alan McNish has got his headlights on. Alan McNish doesn't want to be delayed by any of the little GT2 cars that he's lapping as he strives to hang on to these two flying silver Mercedes. Very much the class of the race, and everybody else dropping further and further behind. Schneider, Zonta, the young Brazilian, Formula 3000 champion last year. Actually looking at the inside of Schneider there. Zonta, I'm sure that isn't in the script, looked as though he was going to have a go at overtaking his team leader. Well, certainly Schneider won't be having that, and Schneider re-establishes himself at the front. They're lapping another GT2 Porsche, and McNish is still close. McNish is still there. Jörg Müller in fourth place, and the other Porsche keeping this battle in sight. But I think that gave Schneider a little bit of a surprise. He suddenly found Zonta coming up inside. Here's this GT2 battle again. Marcos on the left, the two blue and white V10 Vipers. Carl Wendlinger, the leader of that pair, with Pedro Lamy, the young Portuguese, in the second car. Wendlinger, of course, a Formula 1 driver, until he had a dreadful accident. A near fatal accident, in fact, at Monte Carlo just a fortnight after the death of Ayrton Senna, and since then he's had a long call back to recovery. There is Wendlinger at work. Carl Wendlinger in the left-hand drive V10 Viper. It must be very, very warm in there indeed, but Wendlinger now fully recovered from that accident and enjoying a second career in GT racing. Off goes the Porsche 911 GT2 of Takagi Suzuki, right off into the dust, the car he was going to share with Nigel Smith. That may well spell the end of Nigel Smith's work before it's begun here. And look at Schneider, the yellow mirrored Mercedes, right in the back markers. There's Zonta, and Alan McNish is hanging on to Zonta. Zonta briefly delayed by the back marker, and McNish is going through on the outside. McNish has got him! McNish is second! A brilliantly opportunist move there by the little Scotsman. He went one side of the back marker just as Zonta was going the other. Zonta wasn't expecting that at all, as we see Schneider cross the start-finish line. Zonta is fighting back. Zonta is trying to pull alongside Alan McNish as they go past us down towards the first corner. McNish is on the inside. Zonta has to drop back into third place, and as they go sweeping round that corner, McNish has got that second place. Ricardo Zonta pushed down into third, and that's an example of how you can move up in GT races. You use the back markers, and Alan McNish, a very, very skillful driver indeed in these crowded conditions, and through the twists and turns, going down under braking into that chicane, Alan McNish was handed a tiny little opportunity, and he turned it into second place. Oh, and he's hit him! Zonta has hit him! Zonta has hit him twice. They're both off. McNish off, Zonta off, and they're both beached. McNish's wheels spinning. That was the second place battle, and they're both off the road. They were lapping the little GT2 Porsche you see on the left of the picture there. That's Claudia Hurtgen's car, and as they lapped it, Zonta unaccountably seemed to lose his brakes. We're going to see it again. Now, McNish lining up to go inside Claudia Hurtgen. The Mercedes is behind him, and then you see a puff of tyre smoke. There it is, as Zonta locks up his brakes, clouts the back of McNish, spins McNish round, and then hits him again. A great blow in the side as they come to rest on the gravel. We're back with the GT2 battle again. The Marcos being challenged by Carl Wendlinger. Carl Wendlinger is alongside on the outside. They go down to turn one. The Marcos has the line, but the Viper's going round on the outside, and I think he's through. Then Wendlinger has to touch his brakes once more, but Wendlinger is on the right line for the next corner, which is a left-hander. There goes the Viper. The Viper has the GT2 lead. Koreuser pushed down to second place. Oyser challenges again, looks at the inside of the left-hander that follows, and meanwhile Claudia Hertgen's got her Porsche back to the pits. I can tell you that Ricardo Zonta is also out of the gravel, but the last to be released from the gravel is Alan McNish. There he is. McNish only now getting back onto the circuit. Clouds of dust, and I would think clouds of red mist inside the cockpit of that Porsche, because Alan McNish must be absolutely furious. He got that car into second place and he was then booted out. In fact, now this is what's happening. We've been told that Ricardo Zonta is getting a 3-minute stop-go penalty. So the number 2 Mercedes, which doesn't seem to be damaged, is being held in the pits for 3 minutes as a punishment for that. But Alan McNish lost much more time than 3 minutes. He was stationary for 3 whole laps before they finally got that car out. I say it was undamaged, the number 2 Mercedes. It's got a little bit of damage at the front, as back into the race goes Ricardo Zonta, and quite separately, Jean-Marc Gounon in the blue V12 Mercedes has lost his nose section. He left it somewhere out on the circuit. He's come in for a new one, and there is Gounon suffering considerably from the heat. He's out of the car, his co-driver's taken over. The order now, after all these dramas, Bernd Schneider still the leader, Jörg Müller in this Porsche up into second place, Christophe Bouchou in the other person blue Mercedes in third place, and Frank Lebourse in the Pénals is fourth. Jörg Müller out of the car, in gets Uwe Altsson, and there's Ricardo Zonta working his way up through the field after that 3-minute penalty held him in the pits and dropped him down the order. The Marcos coming into the pits now. We've got lots of activity because we're now in the sequence of the first routine stops and driver changes. There's the leader in. Bernd Schneider already out of the car. Mark Webber, his co-driver from Australia, being strapped in, and we've also got the Alan McNish car in. There is the number 7 Porsche. Alan McNish out of that car now. It's well down after losing 3 laps in the gravel, courtesy of Ricardo Zonta. But Yannick Dalmas back at the wheel of that car now, and it's underway, or it is now, slightly slow away. There's Alan McNish making his feelings known to Herr Alfrecht of the German Mercedes team, and he's describing in graphic terms, look at that, exactly how he felt about Ricardo Zonta hitting him from behind. And as Mark Webber goes on his way, lapping the Hugh Chamberlain Viper, let's now hear from Alan McNish.
Zonta just drove into the back of me. It's the second time it's happened this year, and to be honest, I don't think it is the sort of driving that any form of motorsport should advocate, and to do it 2 times to me, I think it's just deplorable. I'm going to have a word with him.
Nothing like being a fly on the wall when that conversation takes place in the pits. Well, the Porsches continue to work their way through the traffic with the number 7 car having a long way to go. That's one of the Conrad cars going off, one of the GT2 Porsches from the Conrad team. He's taking a very, very long way round. I think he's going to get back onto the circuit undamaged. Whoops! Oh, Nelly goes back. Nelly has another accident. And you can see how slippery it is out there. But meanwhile, the Pénals is doing a mighty job in 4th place. The heat in that car must be almost overwhelming, because the front engine car, the exhaust manifold wrapped around the driver's legs, it's very hot in there at any circuit. Here in the tremendous heat of Suzuka, it must be very, very hard to bear. In fact, the cockpit temperatures in any of these cars is intense under racing conditions. There's Jun Harada taking over the 911 GT2 Porsche from Martin Stretton. Stretton's just brought the car in, and I think he is suffering from heat exhaustion. He's lying down in the pit, and they're trying to cool Martin Stretton off, and that indicates what hard work it is here in this race. But Mark Webber seems pretty comfortable. His Mercedes has a big lead, but there's still a long way to go. Welcome back to Suzuka. Mercedes still leading here. The Mercedes with red mirrors is the car of Ricardo Zonta, working its way back up the field after that delay, briefly elbowing the Marcos onto the grass there. The Porsche with its headlights on, just having been unlapped by the flying Mercedes. That is the Jörg Müller, Uwe Altsson, Bob Wallach Porsche, and that's up into second place after the delays both to Zonta and to Alan McNish. We ride now with Jeff Lees in the McLaren going through that tight chicane that ends the lap here at Suzuka, and Jeff Lees and Thomas Bashir have got that car up into an excellent 6th place. The Zonta Ludwig Mercedes is 5th, the Penars is now running in 4th place, and we've had a spin from the 2nd place Porsche. That is the 2nd place Porsche pointing the wrong direction at the chicane, and Bob Wallach on board that car at the moment, actually driving towards the oncoming traffic in his effort to turn round, and that, I'm sure, will incur the wrath of the organisers. Meanwhile, this is the battle for 4th. The Penars has been caught by Ricardo Zonta, the Mercedes, the number 2 car, right on the Penars' tail. This Penars, with its big pushrod American V8 engine in the front, is surprisingly quick in a straight line, but the V8 Mercedes just sneaks through on the inside absolutely effortlessly. That moves Zonta up to 4th, demotes the Penars down to 5th place. And Wallach's been given a 3-minute penalty for that chicane incident. There he is, he's served his 3 minutes, and he's away. He stalled it. Bob Wallach stalled it. I think there must be a clutch problem on that car. He may well have spun because of that. There's somebody else who's on one of the Rook Porsches, which seems to be battered and gently on fire, as the Marcos continues to work its way through the traffic, still 3rd in GT2, and that Marcos seems to have lost most of its driver's door window, but perhaps that's helping Koreuser and his teammates to keep moderately cool inside that hot cockpit. In fact, that Viper is the GT2 leader. It's just lapped the Marcos. Pedro Lamy and Olivier Beretta leading GT2, and that Porsche's off again. It's Jörg Müller at the wheel of that car now, and he's off at the chicane. So is Jeff Lees. Jeff Lees has got the black McLaren going again, drives down the circuit through the chicane, but Jörg Müller doesn't seem to be able to get going again. He was trying to lap the McLaren, and I think that that McLaren is damaged. It's coming slowly down the start-finish straight, but there's damage to the right-hand running gear of that McLaren, and surely his race must be run. Jeff Lees looking in his mirrors, trying to keep out of the way of faster cars as he goes down to turn 1. He's missed the entry to the pits, unfortunately, because the incident happened in the chicane. But you can see part of the bodywork missing on the right-hand side of that car. And Jörg Müller trying to get underway in the number 8 Porsche. He has managed to get the car started. He spent a long time stationary on the grass, but Jörg Müller has got underway again. But the front of that car is damaged. Just look at the front wheel pointing in completely the wrong direction. That must be the end of that Porsche. Into the pits comes what is now the 2nd placed car, the Buschu Maylander Mercedes, having a routine stop. And there's our leader, Schneider and Webber in the number 1 Mercedes. The Zonta Ludwig Mercedes will probably now go into 2nd place. And Alan McNish is on a charge in the number 7 Porsche. There, Mark Webber waiting to take over. He's trying to keep cool for as long as he can before he gets into the cockpit of the leading car. But Alan McNish is absolutely flying. They're working on Jeff Lees' McLaren in the pits, trying to see if they can mend that car sufficiently to get it back into the race. Jeff Lees sitting patiently in the cockpit. And Zonta back at the wheel of the number 2 Mercedes. Ludwig has handed it over. They're changing the wheels now. But the man that I'm interested in is Alan McNish, because he's running just outside the top 3, and he is determined to threaten this 1, 2, 3, 4 Mercedes. And there's confirmation. McNish has actually got into 3rd place with the Porsche. He's 3.9 seconds ahead of the 4th place Mercedes in the picture now. The 2 Silver Arrows 1 and 2, but just behind the 2nd place Silver Arrow is Alan McNish. McNish brings the car into the pits now. A wonderful drive by the Scotsman, which must have made him feel a little bit more cheerful after the frustrations of that early race accident with Ricardo Zonta. McNish out of the car, Yannick Dalmas into the car. Can he hold on to that 3rd place? There's the 4th place Mercedes. There is the 2nd place Mercedes, with Ricardo Zonta now at the wheel again, about to lap the 4th place blue V12 car. And we're expecting a pit stop soon for Bernd Schneider. Bernd Schneider expected to bring the leading car in shortly, as still Ricardo Zonta in 2nd place follows Christophe Bouchou in 4th place. The Jörg Müller Porsche still parked down here beneath my commentary box on the start-finish straight. Its steering apparently broken because of that collision with Jeff Lees, and the blue Mercedes is indeed lapped by Zonta, who also laps, as they both do, that splendid rumbling Marcos, which is still continuing to be in the top three in GT2. And they're ready for Schneider's pit stop. The Mercedes pit ready, Bernd Schneider in the pit lane, and Mark Webber is ready. The headlights on for Schneider comes in. Mark Webber gets the door open, and Schneider, no doubt delighted to have finished his work for the day, but Mark Webber's got the final stint to do. Schneider worms his way out of the tight, hot cockpit. Mark Webber puts his own seat in. They're refueling the car, but they're not allowed to start working on the wheels and change the tyres until the refueling is finished. That's the GT rules in this championship. So refueling and driver change happening. They've got the passenger door shut, and Mark Webber still struggling with his seat belts. The sun getting lower in the sky, and the headlights are coming on all the way around the circuit now. There, the leading Mercedes and Yannick Dalmas in the Alan McNish Porsche running together. The Porsche ahead of the leading Mercedes and about to be lapped for the third time. But that's significant because it was 3 laps that Alan McNish lost while that car was stuck in the gravel after its collision with Ricardo Zonta. If that hadn't happened, the complexion of this Mercedes-dominated race just might have been a bit different. Yannick Dalmas, the very experienced Frenchman, his other teammates, Stéphane Ortelli, also a Le Mans winner, Alan McNish, this year a Le Mans winner. Tremendous experience in long-distance racing for all 3 drivers in that number 7 Porsche, and you can see the brake discs glowing red as Dalmas gets on the brakes, accelerates away out of the second gear hairpin and on through the back section of this circuit. Lights on, says the sign, so everybody must now put their lights on. There's a blue flag there for somebody. In fact, we're looking at the GT2 second-placed Viper of Justin Bell, shared with Carl Wendlinger and Hidashi Matsuda. Big headlights let into the bonnet, which we don't normally see on these cars, although we saw them, of course, at Le Mans. There, cooling off, is Bernd Schneider in the red hat, Klaus Ludwig. Their day's work is done, but they're watching their cars running in first and second places. And that's the leading Viper. Top of GT2, Olivier Beretta, Pedro Lamy and Dominic Dupuis. Vipers 1 and 2, but that Marcos is still running reliably, albeit a lap down, in third place. And the 911 Porsches, there's a gaggle of them about to be swallowed up by the lead Viper. The Porsches vanquished, so far anyway, on this Japanese circuit. It's starting to look like Le Mans here in Japan. The headlights blazing all the way around the Suzuka circuit. There's Ricardo Zonta on his final stint. You can see the brake discs glowing red in the twilight. And one of the GT2 Porsches is going very slowly on the start-finish straight. It's smoking badly. In fact, I think the back of the car is on fire. It's got an oil leak, and the oil is dripping onto the hot exhaust system, it seems. What oil that isn't burning, it's going onto the circuit and making it even more slippery. But meanwhile, we have our leader on his final lap. Mark Webber comes through the chicane in the number 1 Mercedes CLK. The checkered flag is waving. He's greeted by the Mercedes team. He crosses the finish line to win another victory for Mark Webber and, of course, for Bernd Schneider, another Mercedes 1-2 here in Japan. That will put Schneider and Webber 3 points clear at the top of the Drivers' Championship table. It makes Mercedes almost completely unbeatable in the Manufacturers' GT Championship. But for Porsche, in the end, a great third place for Alan McNish.
So the winning streak continues for Mercedes. Yet another 1-2. Frustration, though, for Porsche and Alan McNish. He spent 3 laps in the gravel after Zonta punted him off and finished 3 laps down. It could have been much, much closer. Order was restored in the GT2 class, with the Vipers once again taking first and second and increasing their lead in the championship. Good to see the British-built Marcos giving them a run for their money, though, in the early stages. But these are the cars that everyone's watching. The Mercedes CLKs are almost in a class of their own. Bernd Schneider and Mark Webber now head the Drivers' Championship from teammates Klaus Ludwig and Ricardo Zonta, who are 26 points clear of Alan McNish and Yannick Dalmas. And even Schneider thinks Porsche were unlucky in Japan.
Yeah, I would say the race could be much harder when the Porsche guys had not those problems with Ricardo Zonta, and afterwards they got punished again. That means the guys were a little bit unlucky. They set the fastest lap, that means they're in a good shape. It was just unlucky. Maybe next time we'll see more interesting race.
And next time is at Donington. We'll have that for you in a fortnight.